And a day after President Muhammadu Buhari signed the electoral bill into law, the Independent National Electoral Commission conducted by-elections in Ondo, Plateau, Imo, and Cross River states. The votes were held for new representatives in Akure North, Akure South Federal Constituency, Panchkin South State Constituency, and Jos North Bass Federal Constituency. The elections also held in the Ogoja Yala Federal Constituency and Akpabuyo State Constituency in Cross River State, as well as Ngo-Okpala State Constituency in Imo State. The election was seen as a test for INEC to improve on its logistics strategies and conduct techniques after the glitches experienced in the Federal Capital Territory local council elections held earlier this month. Voting is reported to have gone smoothly in most of the areas, and party agents confirmed by Model Voter Accreditation System. INEC Director in charge of Voter Education and Publicity, Mr. Oluwole Osaze Uzi, now joins us to have a discussion. Mr. Uzi, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Let me quite honestly, point out that I am not the director of Voter Education at INEC. I used to be. I am no longer the director there.
Duly noted.
For the
thank
past
you.
3 years, I've worked for myself.
Okay, thank you for that update. Now, based on these updates that have taken place in the past 2 days with the president signing the Electoral Act into law and INEC rescheduling the elections, what changes do you anticipate come February 2023?
Well, thank you. It was quite momentous witnessing the president sign the electoral bill into law. So we now have an Electoral Act 2022, and that will guide the nearest future, that will guide our elections in conjunction with the provisions of the Constitution. There are some rather revolutionary provisions in that bill, which I think, if implemented, will go a long way towards improving our electoral process. Some of the changes, for example, is the recognition of the use of technology, both in terms of accreditation and in terms of transmission of results. Those are fundamental issues that INEC has been pushing for, and it increases the transparency and the trust in the system. Right from the time the smart card reader was introduced, and there's been a marked improvement in election and election outcomes. And people feel that with the increased technology, there is bound to be even more improvements. You recall that we had issues with the litigations arising from the use of the smart card reader. The old law, the 2010 law as amended, did not recognize a card reader or any technology. It spelled out the means, step-by-step means of accreditation and transmission of results. And you recall that the Supreme Court said that that is the process, the manual process is the process to be followed. But thank goodness that has now changed with this legislative intervention. With the Electoral Act 2022, we now have a recognition that INEC can use a smart card reader or any other technological device, and that's where the BVAS comes into play. So BVAS is the current technological device being deployed by INEC, by the Commission, in the conduct of elections, not just for accreditation of voters, but also for transmission of results. And talking about the BVAS, that will be used for the accreditation, and overvoting, which used to be the total number of ballots exceeding the total number of registered voters, that has been amended as well to say that, look, if the total number of votes exceeds the total number of accredited voters, then there is overvoting. That election in that polling unit or in that area should be annulled. So that is to stop people from just indiscriminately ticking the register, because prior to now, a tick in the register meant you had been accredited. That used to be the system by bypassing the smart card reader, but that has been foreclosed now. So we have issues of that improving the transparency in that regards. And INEC has the result review portal. So as results are coming in, technology will be deployed again, as everybody has seen it in the polling units. Everybody anywhere in the world who has access to the internet will also see the results in each and every polling unit in any constituency where the election is taking place. Again, that's transparency. That improves the credibility. That is good for the system. These are just some of the things. Inclusive of this is the fact that INEC budget for the elections has to be approved by the National Assembly and funds released at least 1 year to the election. I don't know how we're going to do that now. It looks like we're already in breach of that because the election is 23rd of February, so we're already out of time, really. But fortunately for us, I think the 2022 national budget included a portion of the votes to be used, of the funds to be used for that election, preparatory for another budget that will cover the 2023 cycle. So I think in the next few weeks, I expect that INEC should present this budget and that the National Assembly should pass the budget and the presidency should release the funds. The Ministry of Finance should release the funds to the commission so that there can be smooth conduct of that election. These are just some of the thresholds and yardsticks that I think are beneficial to the system and will help improve the system.
All right, Mr. Osaze Uzi, it's one thing to pass a bill into law. It's another thing to actually execute and implement on this particular law right now. Do you think that INEC will be able to fully utilize the powers given to them by this 2022 electoral law right now to make elections seamless in 2023?
Well, the truth of the matter is that in terms of powers given to INEC, the law has not given much more powers to the Commission than it had previously. The donor of the power really is the Constitution. In addition, the National Assembly is allowed to give it more powers. But powers not donated by the Constitution, we have issues with those. One of the new powers of the Commission, the financial independence, is not a power as such, but for the enhanced and smooth running of the elections, early release of funds, that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a power, but that's a good thing. But one of the powers given to the Commission is the power to review results where results were not declared by the free will of the returning officer. You recall that in Imo, there are at least one of the constituencies, state senatorial constituencies, where the returning officer said a gun was pointed to his head, so he declared the result under duress, and INEC refused to release the results, and that is not a free will election result. But the man, I was going to say gentleman, but the man involved went to court, and the court said, look, in view of the Electoral Act as it stood, INEC had no power to withhold the results. Now, for a period, INEC has power to review that kind of situation. So where there is an allegation, where the return officer himself make the allegation that, look, this is contrary to the rules, a gun was pointed to my head, there's undue duress and there's undue pressure on me, then INEC can review that and make a decision. I think it will enhance the administration of the electoral process. I think the political will. INEC has demonstrated in the last couple of cycles of elections that it is prepared to exercise its power fully. And even the allegation was that it exercised some powers it does not have, to cancel some results, as you saw in Osun, or to withhold a certificate of return, as we saw in Imo. For 2 senatorial districts in Imo, INEC withheld the results of the candidates because they said it did not pass through the normal process and it was contrary to the law and the guidelines. But the court held otherwise. So with some of these things, I think the political will has been there. Technology, INEC has demonstrated that it has cutting-edge technology and is ready to deploy those things in the electoral process even before this law came into being. It was already practicing, it was already rehearsing, it was already running pilots for the deployment of technology. So I believe that INEC actually is ahead of the legislature in that regard, and I see no reason why it should resile from the position it has taken in the last couple of electoral cycles. I see no reason. I think the political will for them is there.
Well, Mr. Uzi, transparency in technology and innovation were clearly addressed during the signing of this Electoral Act into law. But do you think enough was done to actually address the safety of the electorate? Because that's also a major issue that surrounds the Nigerian political process.
That's a very interesting question you've asked, and I think it dovetails finally into how I was when I was answering Aaron's question. Now, I don't think everything can be taken care of by legislation per se. Enforcement is an important part of the thing. Electoral safety is not truly well addressed in the Electoral Act, But then again, there are other laws in the land. There's a constitution, there's a police act, there are other security agencies acts that establish security agencies. Those are the kind of legislations, the criminal code and money laundering. All those acts are things that we should deploy in the electoral process. So there's a framework of laws which govern general safety and also address safety of citizens, safety of properties, and everything else. It's not so much the Electoral Act that will necessarily address that. I think the enforcement of those existing laws, and where there are shortcomings, I think we should look at amending those laws. But it's difficult to say that the Electoral Act should address all concerns, even outside of the electoral process, but things that impact on the electoral process also have to be addressed. But I think there are sufficient legislations in place to address those fears and those. It's more of a question for the security agency. Are they prepared to ensure that laws are preserved, laws are not broken, non-state actors do not play undue roles that they should not play in our society generally, but specifically during times of elections. So safety is a big concern, it's a major concern, but I don't think really the Electoral Act has been. There are of course provisions in the Act dealing with campaigns and safety of campaigns and use of violence, use of vanguards and stuff like that. There are those provisions, but those are in addition to the other laws dealing with public safety and security.
All right, we know that not all laws are actually perfect, but more importantly, because we know that President Muhammadu Buhari withheld his assent to that particular bill at the time, which has now become law, based on the fact that he didn't want them disenfranchising political appointees. Now, talk to us about the laws. Which part of the law do you think should be amended moving forward? Because we know that we're not expecting a perfect law, but one that is more transient and one that moves with times.
Good one again. This is where I depart slightly from my colleagues in civil society who say that the president was wrong in asking the National Assembly to take another look at section, I think it's 8412, which deals with qualification and disqualification. And basically that provision did say that political appointees cannot vote at primaries and cannot be voted for. Now, I agree with one half of it. That half that says that they cannot vote at primaries. That, I think, is within the powers of the National Assembly to make law in that regard, because it is not dealt with by the Constitution. Those are provisions dealt with exclusively by the Electoral Act. But the issue of qualification to stand for election or disqualifying factors are actually addressed by the Constitution. Now, where the Constitution has covered the field on that, the issue of whether you're qualified to contest or whether there's a disqualifying factor, those things have been dealt with by the 1999 Constitution for all offices that INEC conducts, for all offices about the National Assembly, the presidency, and governorship. Those are dealt with by the Constitution. You cannot, by an act of the National Assembly, try to overreach or add to or remove a power or rights given by the Constitution. You cannot do that. And I think in terms of saying that political appointments cannot be voted for, cannot qualify to stand, I think the National Assembly overstepped itself and acted unconstitutionally in that regard. And I support an amendment. But having said that, people talk of the overall good of the nation. It probably is a good clause, good provision, but it should be situated within the laws of the land. And anything running contrary to the Constitution is supreme. Anything running contrary to it is bad and cannot stand. So what should we do? I think that our focus should now be back in the National Assembly, where there is now a bill before the National Assembly for the amendment to the Constitution. So if they feel strongly about it, and I think most of us do feel strongly about it, that should be extended as probably a disqualifying factor, that where you are a political appointee, actually the Constitution addresses that. It says where you're a political appointee, you should resign, or a civil servant, a public officer, you should resign 30 days to the election. What the bill tries to do is amend that section by saying you must resign 30 days to the primaries. That is wrong. That clearly is wrong. Nobody can convince me about that, legally speaking. So what we should do is amend the Constitution and say, rather than 30 days to election, because at that time nominations have closed and some of these people will abuse state power, state privileges, and utilize state resources, which they shouldn't do, but in practice we see that they do. So make it 30 days to the primaries, but that should be embedded in the Constitution, not in the Electoral Act. But as for the first leg of it, that you cannot be voted for, well, if that's so, that is the law, and that to me is good law, and that can stand.
Oh, Mr. Oluwole Osaze Uzi, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday and throwing light on that on those very prominent issues. Thank you for your time.